This isn't going. Okay, so that's. Welcome, everyone. I am going to try to see if I can't message the guests that we want to get on here. There's a couple of them who I'm not sure if they're going to get. If they're going to be able to get on here or not without me sending an invite and the usual share button. Okay, here we go. There's one of them. All right, we're getting a lot of people on. Well, thank you all for tuning. This is Book Talk on Book Talk, and one of our first guests is about to join us.
I just kind of need a minute to get set up.
Okay, well, Carlos Rivera is gonna take a minute to get set up. He's a horror author, and my share button is okay. Here's another one, Marcus Rayne. He's a voice actor. Marcus, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're gonna have a pretty full book today. We got Carlos Rivera is a horror author. He's gonna be joining us. Jen Hauser, who's been on the show before, she's a fantasy author and an artist, and Danielle Meuthing, if that's how her name is pronounced, she is a fellow voice actor. So she's gonna be joining us, and I know people kind of go in and out, but we're gonna try to make it as lively as we can. And Sith Biker, yeah, this is like a Zoom meeting. And our executive producer Tanya is in the comments. She just joined us. She's the one who set everything up with you guys. So we appreciate her and everything that she brings. We need to talk about the third quarter numbers. Yeah, no, it's this multi-guest feature is really interesting that TikTok has. I'm going to see if I can share this with Danielle. I don't think that she has, not quite sure whether or not she's been on the live before here. I don't guess. Let's see. All right, so there's Jen. She's here. And so she'll be coming on here in a second.
And hello.
Hey.
Hey.
And I'm trying to share this with one other person who wants to join us, but for some reason, my share button isn't showing just where I can share to somebody on TikTok. It wants me to share like links and stuff, and Snapchat and Facebook. So that's weird. I don't understand what. So there's anyway. I suppose that Danielle, Tanya, you may have to round her up somehow and get her to send me something to accept, because it doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to do that. But good evening, everybody. This is Book Talk on Book Talk, where we discuss books and art and everything like that. Yeah. I know she sent me a message and asking for. She said she's ready when I am. However, I can't. I don't seem to be able to share this live with just anybody on any of my followers. So she's going to have to come on here so I can accept her invite. So Biker wants to know any books. So we're going to discuss all kinds of books. Let's start with Jen. I know that I have a special request that you show us the edge art on one of your books.
No, I didn't know about that. I didn't come prepared because I showed them last time.
Gotcha.
I can go get it if you want, but it'll take me a minute. It's down there.
Yeah. Well, why don't you do that? We'll go ahead and Carlos is new here, and you write horror. Is that right?
That's correct. I just published my first book. It's called White Harbor, and it's part of a three-part, it's a trilogy of horror novels.
Oh, so you have a whole trilogy. Is the whole trilogy out, or is just the first book out?
Just the first book. The second one should be coming up sometime in June. I'm already working on that one.
Okay, okay. Let's see. Tanya says that our other guest is here, but I do not see her. So she might have to resend me the invite. And Marcus, you're a voice actor. What kind of stuff do you narrate?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on and letting me join you all today.
Of
Super
course.
excited about it. Yeah, so
Me
under
too.
Marcus
Sorry, I
Rayne,
forgot to thank. I'm sorry.
oh no worries. Yeah, so under the name Marcus Rayne, I do primarily romance. So all types of romance, contemporary, dark, monster, alien, all the flavors.
Oh, gotcha. All right, what drew you to those type of books?
So I did voice acting for a while, like commercials and animation, and my wife, who's also a narrator, is really into romance. So I started picking them up, and we both kind of started at the same time narrating. So we just chose romance, and we stuck with it, and it's paid off. By paid off, I mean we've been hella booked.
Good, very, very good. Where have you gotten most of your work from? Here on TikTok or ACX?
I would say about 80% right now is from ACX. So just pure auditions. I've done some work with some publishers, and then about 15% has been from social media.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and I think we're finally going to get Danielle on here with us. So there we go. And of course, Danielle is also a voice actor, so I'll ask her the sort of the same thing whenever she gets on.
And I'm back.
Finally.
Hey, there we go. Glad you could join us, Danielle. And pronounce your last name for me, if you would.
It's Meuthing.
Okay, so I had it right.
Yeah.
My last name, for everybody, I guess, is pronounced Treon, rhymes with Freon, but I have heard it so many different and very interesting ways. I've heard it Treon. The weirdest one is Trehan. Somehow there's an H in there. But yeah, I never quite understood that one. But with everyone here, and we have people that are down in the comments, and Tanya, is doing a great job of letting everyone know there. But one of the best things you can do to help us get viewers is to share. So if you share this with your friends who you think might be interested, that'd be great. Also, liking the video. The more likes we get, the more TikTok puts it out there to folks. So for all you people who are joining and watching, all the fans of the show, that's a great way to help people come on, and we can see the questions down there, and make sure that we have a lot of folks interacting. So anyway, Jen had come out, and she went and got her book. So show us that edge art, and that is and that's super cool, because I've seen it where it's all painted one color, but to have like kind of icons on there is really excellent. And do you do that yourself, or do you outsource that?
I taught myself, and I'm actually going to be starting to offer services this year. I'd hoped that I could get it in January, but I've got too many projects going on right now, so hopefully February. But I've got 2 more book journals with different designs that will be coming out in March, and I'll be offering services for other authors. And it's cool because, like, it's technically forward printed, so this comes from an Ingram Spark or KDP, and you don't have to be a big publisher to get the fancy stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
That's
Danielle, what type of books do you narrate?
Right now, I kind of.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? You hear me okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mostly fantasy. I've done some horror, a lot of comedy. So yeah, that's about it. But I'm up for anything. So.
Gotcha. We haven't had many people who write anything comedic or read anything comedic on the show. Where are you finding those authors to do their narration?
Mostly it's still fantasy, but they're usually funny. So, I found a lot of the people I work with right now, I found either through ACX, or through word of mouth. So, those are the people I find for now, you know, always
Gotcha. Well,
expand.
hopefully, some people will see this, and you have some more people knocking on your door. And to all those people who are watching, if you like books and you like audio narration and you like authors, follow all of us. We follow back and get into the comments. And that's one of the great things about TikTok and really about social media in general is it has allowed a lot of independent content creators to hook up with each other and to collaborate, which is always an excellent thing. Um,
Mhm.
so I wanted to ask you, Carlos, what draws you to horror, and because you're probably only the second or third horror novelist that we've had on the show so far.
Well, I guess since I was a kid, I was always kind of like a very lonely, very introverted kid, and so I tended to fantasize a lot and find things to read. And since I was kind of a very lonely kid, I wanted to look for things that didn't feel as safe for me, but which wouldn't actually put me in danger. So that's kind of the thrill of reading horror. The fact that you're putting yourself in the shoes of a character that's going through some really awful stuff, and you want them to succeed, and they might or might not. And it was kind of that thing that drew me to it. This idea of I live in this little bubble that is my room, with very little interaction with other people, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody that's going through all of these things that scare me and might or might not make it through them. It's kind of the same idea of somebody who reads fantasy or somebody who reads romance. It's putting yourself in the shoes of somebody going through something different. In my case, it's somebody going through something scary.
And that's what I was about to say is that all of us who write, and Jen also definitely knows this. You are taking real life and you are sort of putting it through this weird prism that us authors have, and you're kind of looking at it through a funhouse mirror in a way. Whenever you write stuff like fantasy and horror. And even with me with the crime fiction, all of my stuff is very realistic, and I go through a lot of effort and research to make it that way. But we still, all of our characters and all of our, and usually like the murders themselves or kidnapping or whatever it is, it's all over the top, right? It's with horror and crime fiction, it's usually we're going to show the how bad do we think the world can possibly get, and what are the worst circumstances, and then you know fantasy is all about allegory and also the very outlandish things, and then you have romance. Depending on what type of romance, a lot of times it is what we wish that our romantic lives could be like, or sometimes it's about how bad do we could a romance be, if it starts sort of romance. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of us, especially those of us in crime fiction, oh, dinosaur, that's nice. Whenever we really hope that nobody looks at our search bar for our research, and that's especially in crime fiction and horror. Like I look up things like medical examiners' records for either actual crimes or for like how long does it take somebody to bleed out whenever this wound happens, or what kind of poison is
Been
undetectable. Like,
there.
Yep.
yeah, the FBI probably could have a really fun time with a lot of our search stuff. So,
Hey,
Yeah,
Rayne,
for the
and,
book, go
I got a
ahead.
and
question. This
oh,
is
I'm
for
sorry. Go
obviously
ahead.
the authors. So when I'm narrating, right? So if I'm narrating a dark romance, I kind of get into a like almost weird mood by the time I'm done narrating, because I've been playing this like kind of unhinged character for like 3 hours in an enclosed space. As writers, do you feel that you kind of get into the same like mindset as that character? Obviously, you're not going to go off and do some some crazy stuff. But like, do you have to like take a minute to like pull yourself out of that?
Go for it, Jen.
Oh, I mean, I think you do to some extent. Now, I mostly publish like lighter fantasy, but I have done a lot of research for like a domestic terrorism thriller and stuff. Like a lot of things interest me. But yeah, especially writing like from an anti-hero's perspective and realizing like how can I justify this? How can I feel like I'm in the right? But also knowing that me as a person on the outside, I would find their actions and their beliefs morally very wrong. So it is a very interesting place to put your head, and then you kind of just step back and you're like, okay. I think it depends how deep you dive. I'm sure some folks up here probably get a lot deeper, and I don't know.
Yeah. How about you, Carlos? What happens to you whenever you're getting into one of your horror characters and stuff's just really going bad for your characters?
So one of the things that I always do with my characters is that every single one of my characters has something of me or of an experience that I've been through in my life. So sometimes it can get a little bit painful. Like, for example, like in the book that I'm publishing right now, the main antagonist, you could say, is the protagonist's mother. And from there, I'm pulling a lot of interactions that I've had with my own mother in the past. I mean, we didn't used to have a very good relationship. Now we do. We're actually very a very happy family right now, but we didn't used to be. So whenever I'm writing things that have to do with that, you mentioned allegory. Like whenever I try to write something based on the types of interactions I used to have with her, or I guess an abstraction of those interactions, it does get painful. It does put me in a kind of a dark mood, and I do need some time to clear my head after.
Yeah, and I want to thank the Bookish Girl Review. She was the one sending us all those fun gifts, and thank you. We're all small creators on here, so we absolutely love any gifts that people are willing to give. And as for me, yeah, there's definitely a physiological reaction whenever you are, in deep third person or first person, and you are writing an emotional scene or an action scene or anything like that. Yeah, people who hear me type, and especially if I'm typing an action scene, I type really loudly and they can hear, and they go, man, you really attack that keyboard. I'm like, well, that's just how I'm feeling, and if there's no if I don't have that reaction whenever I'm writing, I know that there's a good possibility that's not coming through on the page. And if it's not coming through on the page, then it's the reader is not going to feel what I want them to feel, and that's our ultimate goal, right? Is to transfer our emotions to them, and we can't do that directly, but doing it through storytelling is one of the is one of the only ways that you can. There's really a lot of magic in that, and I know that the voice actors who do our narrations, they really really can make that happen. Danielle, whenever you're doing, especially the comedic stuff, what is your process for making sure that you are in the right mindset for whatever character you're narrating, and how do you transition from characters that are polar opposites whenever you're doing the voice acting for the horror?
Oh, bless you. What a great intricate question. Before you even start a book, you have to learn all of your characters. Not so much the smaller ones, but your main character. Like, you already want to know who they are, what they're thinking, what they're going to sound like, what their ideas are. And then as you're doing it, I mean, as an actor, I did learn how to do that through acting classes. Back in the day, I've worked with children's theater a lot. And so you're constantly jumping between characters when you're in, unless you're one of the main characters, you're always 50 side characters. So you're always jumping in between characters. So I learned how to do that. So it comes in very handy with audiobooks. And yeah, I do love the one I'm working on right now. There's a character and she's half vampire, half succubus. So, and her both halves have conversations with each other all the time. And her vampire is more silly and more, she's a little more normal and her succubus is just evil demon. So it's very fun to do those scenes where they talk back and forth. So yeah, just acting techniques, you know.
Gotcha. Marcus, how about you?
Uh, so yeah, a very similar situation, right? Because like she said, you have to get to know the characters before you even start the project. And so when I go through, when I work with my authors, I have them fill out kind of a worksheet, like, you know, who are the primary characters in the book? Tell me a little bit about the personality. Because even after reading a book, I feel like sometimes you don't get the full sense of who they are, right? Because whether they're through like, you know, speech patterns or what they do throughout the book, you don't always get their full personality. And I can assume as authors, you have a personality for them, whether it's not completely there or not. You know what I mean? And so then when I read the book, you know, I kind of mark up who's speaking and kind of what personalities and voices to give these characters. And as she was saying, like, so I'm playing a half spider, half humanoid guy right now, called a Vrix, in a book called Ensnared, and it's always interesting because, you know, doing normal romance, these are real human like emotions and connections, and you're playing a human character. So it's always an interesting challenge to apply the same human feelings to non-human characters. And I think as an actor, it really kind of pushes your experience to the max, like to the limit, right? Because you're trying to portray these as somebody you can understand, and you can, you know, I'm trying to think of the word, but you can feel what they're feeling, right? Because you want to hear from their perspective what's going on in their life. And I think it's a really cool opportunity to bring those characters of all books to life. You know, give them a voice, bring that personality out of the pages, and you know, super thankful for all the opportunities. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. And go ahead.
See, I think you narrators do something special to books that authors often really struggle with. And I think that sometimes when I listen to audiobooks and then I hear reviews from readers who just read it, that we have different experiences, because my biggest criticism about a lot of writing is that authors, we intimately know everything about our characters, right? We know their motivations, their fears, why they did what they did. We have that interiority, but we often suck about getting it on the page so that other people can experience that headspace the same way. And even, you know, big name published authors, I find that a problem. But for you, I wonder how much of a challenge it is, but it's also a blessing for audiobook readers that where the author may have lacked a little bit more description that would bring it to life, you kind of have to. You have to decide, like, how desperate do they sound when they're saying this? How terrified is that voice tremble, right? And so I think that's the cool thing about audiobooks, but also maybe harder for you guys. I don't know.
I actually
Carlos,
wanted to add something
something.
to. I actually wanted to add something to that question because it's very in line with what I was going to ask. How granular do authors get when you guys are narrating for them? Like as we can tend to be a little bit protective of our characters and things like that. So how granular do people get when they tell you, "Oh no, this phrase you should say it this way," or "Oh no, this is the intention"? How much of that happens?
So something that we do when you start, especially with a new author, is we do something called the first 15, or, you know, and it depends on what you want to call it, but it's something where you take about 15 minutes of the book and you record it. For me, when I talk to authors, I say either you can pick the 15, we can do it by character. If you want to, if there's certain characters you want to hear, I'll find 15 minutes that involve those characters, or I can just do 15 minutes. And then you listen to that and we talk about it, and you can let me know things like your pacing is a little off, or your you know, maybe the way that you're portraying this character isn't quite what I was feeling, or whatever. And then I'll go back and I'll make revisions to what I've done. I'll do that twice. For me, that's my personal thing. Everybody has their own thing, but I'll do that twice of doing revisions. And at that point, once it's cleared, once the author or the rights holder says you're good to go, then I go. And that's it. That's it as far as being able to tell me what I can do with the not so much like if I mess something up, I mess up words or I mess up phrases or whatever, that's different. But like saying to me now, after all of that, you say, I didn't really like the way you said this line. Sorry.
Gotcha.
But that's good. That's good because you're putting a like a limit because people can get annoying, I can imagine, after a certain while. So it's good that you do that.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. It's your work, and I totally understand that it's like you have a very big passion for it. And I think that's why me and Marcus, and I know a lot of narrators do, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page before we even get past that point of cool, do your thing. You know, I want to make sure that I'm in your character's head. I do the character sheet as well. Like Marcus was saying, I'll send out something and say, tell me everything you want to tell me about these characters. Even if there's actors that you think of while you were writing this character, who is it? And then I can kind of have an idea of who that is, you know? So, but by the time we get to recording that book, hopefully we're so on the same page that there won't be any problems like that, you know?
That's awesome.
You know, I know the voice actors went over how they get how they find those characters and you know what they ask the authors to do and how they find the personalities. I'm interested in how you do it as authors because I generally have to be pretty well through my draft before I really know my characters well. But I know that some authors, you know, they do entire character bios and everything before they even start their draft. So I'm interested, Jen and Carlos, so which type are you? Do you find the characters and develop their personality and their voice as you're exploring and writing the first draft, or do you guys do that beforehand before you even start with the story? Go ahead, Jen.
Jen, want to go?
I usually discover them as I'm writing, and they are often very non-committal characters, where it's just like they're easily offended in one moment, and then they're like cowering and like, oh, okay, in another moment, like, hey, we got to pick it, like, who are these people? And so it does take a little bit, and that's something that I actually kind of work on. Like, I mean, I have my fantasy books, but I do want to create more resources for authors and even myself, just like asking those questions of like, what's their biggest fear? How would they react in given situations? So I want to come up with a resource and kind of maybe even help myself in the process, really try to define who they are. So it saves me time.
Gotcha. I think that's very similar to how I do it. I mean, I do it kind of as I go, but I have a general idea of who this character is. And then the character evolves as I'm writing. One example I can give is I had this idea for one of the characters in my first book, and I already knew what this character was, what his purpose was going to be and everything. And then when I was writing him, I was like, oh, this guy's gay. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And then as I was writing, just that realization that character is gay started informing his motivation for why he was doing what he was doing. So that can happen, and it's really interesting. You know, getting to know your characters. You have a preconception of who they are, and then they become someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have that foundation. And then I think it's more in like the individual situations in a given scene where you can get in more trouble about like, why did they react that way? Maybe that wasn't quite in line with the bigger picture. And I think it is fun to kind of discover more things. Like I have an aromantic asexual character who I didn't know that's who she was until much later. And then like it just kind of like you realize that's what they are. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have like the little pieces of the puzzle, and then as you're writing, you're like, oh, there's this entire picture that I had no idea was there, but I'm so happy that I discovered it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a character in Let the Guilty Pay I was writing, and just like as I was writing that, she basically told me that she was bisexual, and so. I've had that experience too, and it's always nice when it feels, at least in our crazy writer brain, that the character is the one telling us things rather than us saying, okay, I need this character to be blank. I need this character to react in this way, to want to be this thing, because we've all read those books where that comes out a little bit unnatural, and a character is like, as a reader, am not sure based on everything I read before that the character would actually do that. And usually that's whenever there's been a very rigid plot that an author has come up with, and they just need their characters to do this thing because that is what fits their plot, rather than allowing the plot to come about as a natural reaction, as a natural course that your characters take based on the choices they make. And so whenever I tell authors and they ask me, how do I plot a book, and it depends on what genre. Like if you're doing a Agatha Christie style mystery, you have very specific things you have to do. But a lot of times I tell them, when you're drafting, think of your plot as a series of choices that your main character or main characters make. Put them in the situations you want to put them in, and then see how they react. And based on what choice they make, they're going to go into a different situation. They make another choice. And if you think about plot, as being a series of choices your characters make, I think the story reads a lot more naturally, and you usually end up with a really good, satisfying ending that way, as opposed to if you try to force a plot onto your characters. Going back to the voice actors, I know that Danielle, you said that you were I guess a stage actor before. What are some of the differences between doing audio only and doing that other kind of acting, and how much did being a trained actor help you whenever you wanted to do voice acting?
Well, one of the biggest differences, of course, is the audience. I have no audience anymore. So you don't, when you're on stage, you get that automatic response of if you're being funny, or if your song went well, you get applause or whatever. So I don't have that anymore. I don't have anyone to react off of. So you have to kind of learn how to pretend they're there, or whatever it is that you need to do to realize that you still are talking to someone. And that is another big difference, is the intimacy of the microphone as compared to a huge stage or a huge theater. I'm not acting to the back wall anymore. I'm acting to this microphone. I'm acting to this person that I'm talking to, either telling them the story or whatever it is that I'm having to do. So those were probably the two biggest things that I had to kind of figure out, rein it in. I can be kind of big sometimes. So rein it in. But yeah, what was very helpful was being a storyteller as far as an actor. I used to do a lot of the stuff that I did, especially in the later years, became more about storytelling. And so it was kind of easier to bring that into audiobooks, because that's what it is. Just tell me the story, So, yeah.
Awesome. Have you done any stage actor or anything like that, Marcus?
No on stage, no on camera. I've mainly done voice acting the entire time I've done voice acting. I started in commercials and animation and like sports. I used to call them announcements. I did a lot of Jumbotron in Texas, where I was from. They have massive stadiums, right? Massive Jumbotrons they would play commercials on. That's actually where I got my start, is I would record the audio for those commercials and they would play them during games or whatever. So no formal acting background. I took some voice acting classes just to get a base. And as I've been doing more books, I've taken coaching sessions with coaches, and actually have another one next week. Like I try to keep up on that, because at the end of the day, when you're competing with other people in this space, a lot of people have stage backgrounds or on-camera backgrounds. So in order for someone who is newer to voice acting as a whole, those kind of things are almost key. They're not necessary, but they're almost key to help you succeed. And I encourage anyone who's interested, do the whole thing where you read a book in your closet for 2 hours a day or something. But go to a coach, spend the money, spend your $150 or whatever your coach charges, find out if it's something you're interested in, and get that base level. This turned into like a mentor session. Sorry about that.
So I did have one thing to add, and it's well, I hadn't mentioned this, but I worked for Audible for 8 years, and I was there when they added the option of rating the voice acting separately from the plot and the book, and I always thought that was a great addition because you guys do an amazing job. I mean, I haven't worked there for 3 years now. And I still keep my account because I just love audiobooks, and you guys just bring the books to life, so that's awesome.
What did you do at Audible?
Well, I actually started there as a phone agent, and then I moved on to operations manager for ACX. So I was there for quite a while. I was 9.5 years at Amazon, and out of those 8 were working for Audible.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think this is the first time I've spoken to someone who's worked at the audio side. I know a couple of people who've worked at Amazon, but that's pretty cool. So, working at Amazon, like, did that help you make the decision that you wanted to write and publish books on Amazon, or how did your day job inform that?
So I guess what Amazon did was it gave me the knowledge that I could actually publish a book independently, because that was not an option that I knew I had before. Before I worked there, because I worked at Audible, and that year and a half that I was not in Audible, I was working for KDP, and that was my introduction to independent publishing. And I was like, wait, I can actually do this. And then I waited a very long time to actually do it. But I guess that was the thing. First of all, it got me hooked on audiobooks. It got me hooked on books. I always read, but never as much as after I joined Amazon, because, sitting there at an office, sometimes when you have time off, you just want to read or listen to a book. So it basically took the passion I already had and all the writing that I was already doing, and I was like, oh, I have this option. I can publish this thing. And here we are.
Excellent. So I wanted to ask Jen too. Whenever you first started out wanting to publish independently, what were sort of the first the first steps that you took? Because I know, like me, I went the traditional route with small presses first because I didn't want to learn how to do all of this that comes with independently publishing a book. And this was back in 2017. So did you just decide? Did you do all the research at once and decide you were going to do it, or how did that evolve for you?
Yeah. So I, like a lot of people, started writing and wanting to publish in 2020. I worked for an airline. Not a great time during the pandemic. So I had several months off between like a industry in distress leave of absence and a medical leave of absence, and I started writing books. And I was not on TikTok at the time, but I was deep into BookTube and AuthorTube, and I just soaked up all the knowledge I could. First of all, deciding how I wanted to publish, deciding that in the end I do want to be a hybrid, but for now I'm happy with indie, and learning kind of the ropes of that. Obviously, I've not learned how to market well. That's my weakness. I don't know how to get people to read my books. But learning,
it's not just you.
learning how to, format and just go through a lot of different things. Yeah, I did a lot of research. I didn't want to release a poor quality book, and then have to go back and revise it. I wanted it to be as perfect as it could be from the get-go. So I really did all that research beforehand.
And for me, I went to work for Blue Handle Publishing, small press, and learned that, they basically use a lot of the same tools that independent authors are using now. So by virtue of having to learn that stuff now, I feel like, I could absolutely go either way with my work in progress. I'm going to pitch it to agents, see if, I can, get an advance that'll, get me out of all my debt and everything. And if that doesn't work, then I know that I am capable of putting out a very good product. And, I know all of the things that are going to make it to where people won't be able to really tell the difference between a book that I put out and one that's put out by a big publisher, with the exception of, whether or not I get a billboard in Times Square or not. That's usually that's the big difference between the major publishers and what we're able to do. I wanted to add, so for the voice actors, do you guys is one of your goals to maybe read for New York Times bestselling authors, or does it matter to you one way or the other? Like, what are sort of the things that voice actors look at when they look at what makes them successful at what they're doing? Because for authors it can be a little easier. There are lists, there are awards, but I'm not quite sure what's out there for voice actors. Marcus, why don't you take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so it's a tough one, right? So I work with a lot of indie authors, and right now where I'm at in my narration career, I try to do books that I find interesting. So if I'm going to enjoy reading them in a box like this for a week straight, I want it to be something that I enjoy. Would it be awesome to narrate for New York Times bestsellers? Of course, but like long-term goals, sure. But I think right now I'm really focused on just doing books that I enjoy, and I've really enjoyed working with indie authors because I've done publisher work, and you don't have that connection. You don't get to chat with the author. Sometimes they'll let you, but for the most part, there's a middleman, right? You send off your files, you get the book, that's about it. With indie authors, a little extra work, just because there are a lot of moving parts, but you get to actually have a conversation with them and be close with them. So a lot of my authors have become friends, which has been amazing. And for instance, the book I'm working on right now, I came across a character that, like, all these guys sound like monsters, right? So there has to be some variation. So I'm like sending voice clips at 10:30 at night, like, hey, which one of these do you like? I wouldn't be able to do that if it was not an indie author, to an extent, right? Real quick, Rick, I do think Tanya mentioned I do have to take off here in a couple minutes, but I do want to hear Dee's answer though.
Mine's not much different. And for me, it's kind of where I am in my life. Before the pandemic hit, I was working easily, I think 3 jobs, maybe 4 jobs at a time. Because as an actor in Cincinnati, Ohio, there isn't a lot of work. So, or at least a lot of work that can give you a full-time job. So I was teaching, I was acting, I was on stage, I had my own private show, like a show that I was doing for nursing homes. I would go and sing for nursing homes. And that might've been it at the time of the pandemic. Oh, and I was doing this audiobook thing I do. And then the pandemic hit, and all I had was audiobooks. Everything else went away because I couldn't do it. And I was like, I'm breathing. This is amazing. I felt like all I was doing was running. Every job I had to just go, 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 go. And so when that happened and I was able to I took that whole year, because I'd already been doing it for a year, but I took 2020 to just kind of focus solely on this. And I built it to a point where it can be my only job. And I want it to be my only job. And I don't want a lot of stress. I don't want it anymore. So I am in the same boat as Marcus. I work with independent authors. Sure, Christopher Moore, reach out to me. I would love to do one of your books. Will that happen? Probably not. But someday maybe, but I'm not pursuing it. I'm not going after, I'm happy where I am. And I absolutely love that I'm friends with most of my authors that I've worked with. I think that's so cool that it's like, some of them I've never met. I've never even talked to on the phone. And yet I'm like, yeah, they're my friend, I will say we do have awards. We have the audio awards. So it's awards for audiobook narrators. So, you can get awards. You can get those accolades. And maybe someday. But right now I'm pretty darn happy just chilling in my booth and talking to my independent authors and having fun doing books that I love.
I love those answers. And Marcus, real quick before you go, one, I love your booth, and I know that Tanya was giving me a little static down in the comments about my room partition back there, because we have kind of an open floor plan, so that's like my office. I cut it off, and we're working on getting a backdrop that looks like a library back there. But I love the lights, love your booth. And where can people find you online other than here on TikTok? What's your website? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so here on TikTok is a great place. There's a link in my bio that will link you to everything I've done. MarcusRayne.com is where you can reach out to me if you want to chat. So I'm a very open person about helping people, even if I don't plan on working with them. So I feel like daily I have authors in my DM say, hey, how do I do this? Or, how do I go about this audiobook process? I'll give them, not the spiel, but I'll walk them through what I can walk them through. And if I never talk to them again, it's not a big deal. So I'm an open book when it comes to helping people, because I believe everyone deserves an audiobook. Because, as an author, I'm sure we would love to hear your words come to life. It's just a different feeling. I've seen the look in the author's eyes when they hear their first paragraph read aloud. And it's like a magical experience, right? We get to give them that experience. So yeah. That's where you can find me. Thanks again for having me on, and I think I'm connected with all of you now. I think I followed Jen and Carlos, right? Is it Carlos?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we followed each other recently too.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thank you for all the great information, and I know that people were asking about those audio awards. I guess they're in March, and do either of you know whether or not they broadcast those, or where we can find any results or anything like that?
The results will probably be posted afterwards, but they probably have a live stream you can watch if you really wanted to. There's a big
in the comments.
Yeah. There you go. Live updates on Twitter. That's
right
after a conference called APAC, which is Audiobook Publishers Association, I believe. So a lot of narrators go to that, and then they hop over to the Audis right afterwards. So kind of an industry thing.
Very cool. All right. Well, Marcus, thanks again. Thank you again. And hopefully we'll have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, you know what Danielle was thinking about that, and Marcus, I think it's exciting to collaborate. I haven't gotten an audiobook yet. I want to take the leap, but like a lot of people, it's finances and commitment and trying to figure out the contracts, because it's just so much more complicated than the actual print. But I imagine that, like, how could you not feel a lot closer with someone because you're creating art that's connected with my art. Someday I think it'd be fun to try co-writing. For now, yesterday or the day before, I found out that I was accepted in my first anthology, and I'm already excited to I gotta find out who the other authors are, and really excited about that. So it's fun working with other people.
Congratulations. And it is. I actually have you talked to Danielle and Marcus too about getting to really collaborate with the authors, and that really I did not get to do that with my audiobook for my debut, Deep Background. And it was like Marcus was talking about, there was a third party involved, and it wasn't even my publisher. My publisher contracted out to an audiobook specific publisher, and I didn't even remember if it was maybe Beacon Audio, something like that. But anyway, the voice actor did end up contacting me, but it was going to be his first time too. And so we were kind of the blind leading the blind, and it ended up, they told him not to do not to do accents and try to do a whole lot of voice inflection. And it really, they basically ended up making him, just kind of read it very, very straight. And so as a big fan of the very creative audiobooks that I'm sure that, that you enjoy doing, I felt about as flat as his voice was, and it wasn't his fault. We talked about it. It was what the company that hired him told him to do, and neither one of us could override that. So I think it's great that TikTok especially, but I think it's great that independent creators now And of course, remember, this was back, I think, in 2018, whenever that happened. I think it's great that now everybody's able to collaborate and get in touch with each other much more easily, and that social media, they all had this little corner where the authors and narrators and artists and book cover creators can all kind of get together and collaborate, because that really didn't exist even just like 5 years ago. So I want to thank you audiobook narrators for helping create that space, because the quality of the audiobooks out there, I think, is really doing nothing but going up, which is why that market is really continues to go up, even as different print and ebook markets go up and down, which is something we track. Blue Handle Publishing, audiobooks, even though they're not as big as the other ones, they're the only ones that are constantly year after year growing that market. So at some point, they may even overtake books, especially as the written word just unfortunately becomes less and less important to society, which is something I've been thinking about recently, and I really dislike. But that's that's a downer, so we're going to not talk about that. So I have my own story about it, but I wanted to ask Jen and Carlos, what do you guys do whenever you're feeling blocked creatively? Because and if you tell me you haven't, then I'm just going to boot you out of here, because I mean, come on now. But whenever you do find yourself staring at the blank page, do you have any tips for maybe some of the writers who are down in the comments who want to get back into that groove?
So for me, what I do is I just write whatever. It's something that I guess it's advice that I heard from Neil Gaiman, that he said, your second draft is making sure that you make it seem like you knew what you were doing on your first draft. So what I do is, if I sit down and I just look at that page and I have no idea what I'm going to write, I just start writing whatever. And eventually something comes from that. And maybe there's going to be a sentence. Maybe there's going to be something there that I'm like, oh, this has potential. Let's follow this. But it's about having that discipline of at least once a day, just allocating that time to sitting down and doing it, and just whatever comes to mind, even if it's poorly written, even if it doesn't have anything to do with your book, that might be a short story down the line. Whatever, you just sit down, write whatever you comes to mind, and later on you can sit down and polish that and see if it's something worth it. But I guess my advice would be that if you're feeling blocked, just sit down and write your grocery list or something. Something might come from that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good advice. How about you, Jen?
For me, as an indie author and publisher, I think it's such a great fit because I have been diagnosed with ADHD, and when the hyperfixation is there, I am writing thousands of words a day. NaNoWriMo's got nothing on me. But on days like, I don't know, the last few days where I've been in a funk and I'm in the kind of muddy middle of a book, and while I like the scenes I know I'm going to write, I just do not want to write them, then I can do something else. Like last night, I stayed up and one of my books that's coming up in March, there were just some tiny pixelation that I didn't like on the edges. So then it takes me several hours to redo everything. I was like, well, if I don't want to write this next scene, then I can go work on that project. And then when I kind of got tired of doing that, then I was like, well, let's talk about what are some items that I can add to PR packages for a future book release. And that's what I thrive on, is being able to bounce between multiple projects all in one day. So yeah, I didn't get a lot of words on the paper, but I was still productive and moving forward with my many things that I balance.
That's very similar to what I was going to say, because and not as a symptom of ADHD, which I think a lot of people don't know that hyperfocus is something that goes along with that. I didn't know until I met some folks who had that diagnosis. I have always been good at just sitting down and focusing on whatever it is I want to do. If it was homework, whenever I was in high school, chaos could be going all around me. I'd have three friends throwing fruit at each other, literally fruit at each other. And I was sitting there doing my homework. I just had that ability. And I've been able to take that into my writing. But what I found is that the way I used to work before and during COVID, I would work maybe 5-6 months of the year at usually jobs that other people didn't want to do, which means they paid really well and they were short term, like working on oil pipelines or doing census working, knocking door to door. Which, by the way, when that comes around in however many years, holy crap, does that pay very well? I mean, we're
I did the
talking,
census 1 year too.
yeah, no, $25 to $30 an hour overtime. It was great. But then I could take the
Wow.
other half of the year and I could really just drill down and write one or two novels, and that's kind of how I operated for a few years. And then coming out of COVID, that money went away because even those jobs started to dry up eventually in the second, and third year of us having to deal with that pandemic. So I got my current job, Blue Handle Publishing, love it. I get to edit, books, basically half the time, and the other half I'm, doing sort of project management and that kind of stuff that comes along with being, a professional, person. But I found that I can't just sit there and completely dive into something and stay there for 8 to 10 hours a day for 3 weeks, 4 weeks on end before even coming up for air. And so what I found is that whenever I find a project I kind of get stuck on, I've started embracing the idea of having multiple projects, like you were talking about, Jen. And so recently I decided I'm going to go full in and really learn how to do screenwriting, right? Screenplays for television and film, because it is such a radically different format. It looks very different. And even though the storytelling is very much the same, it is a new skill. And so switching between those, I got into it and I have to polish it, obviously, but I wrote the first episode of a planned limited series, which is based on a wild true story from here where I live in Amarillo. And I didn't realize it until I looked, but over the weekend I wrote 18,000 words, just going and going and going. And then once I kind of got that out of my system and got that story down, at least the first episode that I planned, now I'm coming up with better ideas for the novel. And so then I'm going to be able, okay, and I went and rearranged that story for the screenplay today, and then tomorrow I have a lot of words that are just ready to come out. And so I'm going to go into my Word document and I'm going to do that. And it's interesting how all of a sudden I've shifted, how I approach writing, and I have these different things that I can do one and do the other, whichever one my brain wants to do that day. I can do that one and know that somewhere in the back, the other project is still working, and then I can shift over and hopefully a flood of words will come out onto that. So, I never thought that would be a good strategy to have a whole bunch of different things going on and just bounce around. But I really think moving forward, that's something I'm going to be able to do. So Danielle, I have an interesting question. I don't know if it's a good question or not, but do you have days as a voice actor where you are not able to reach down and find whatever it is that allows you to do what you do to get, stuff, I guess, on tape? It's not tape anymore, but whatever that is. Do you have days where you feel blocked, and is there anything you're able to do? Because, I feel like it would be frustrating to try to narrate something and just know that you've wasted 4 or 5 hours and have to redo it. Like, authors do that sometimes, but I feel like it's easier for us than it would be for you, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I have days where I wake up and it's just not the day. It's not the day to do it. And I usually know pretty quick once I'm down here, and I can feel when I'm trying to force it. I can feel when it's like, I'm not into this today. I can't find these characters. They're not in my brain. I'm not having fun reading this. And if I'm not having fun doing it, it's not going to sound good. So sometimes I'll just stop. I'll just give myself the day off because I can, as long as I'm not under any time crunch. I'll just give myself day off. Or I live in a really nice neighborhood, and sometimes I'll just go take a walk. I usually listen to an audiobook when I'm on my walk, and I'll just go take a walk. And sometimes after the walk, I'm feeling better and I'm ready to come down and work. Sometimes I'm not, and then I'll turn on a video game and and disappear into a different world for a while. So, yeah, that is kind of the nice part about my job, is that as far as scheduling goes, if I can schedule out enough time, I can give myself a little bit of a cushion for those days where I'm not quite feeling it.
Yeah. And you know, I'm glad I'm not writing under any contracts anymore, because you know, I had a book that I did write under a contract, and it was a sequel. It was the first sequel I ever tried, and the main character, you know, I write sort of darker crime fiction, and those guys are not always very heroic, and so I now know that, you know, you kind of need a more of a true hero to really carry a series. You know, I think, or at least I think I need to, because by the time, you know, I just shouldn't have happened, and it was totally my fault. I should have just told the publisher, because it's not like any, you know, real money had exchanged hands. I could have said, "Hey, I don't think this is the deal. Let me write another standalone for you." But yeah, that, you know, there is a difference between writing on spec and writing under contract. I want to shift gears back to the authors. Something that's been on my mind this week is author events and book events, because for Blue Handle Publishing, we have two of them coming up tomorrow. We have an author who lives in Tennessee coming in for a big sort of pop-up event we're doing at a local bar/coffee shop, and then she's also going to do a book signing at our local bookstore. So I wanted to ask Jen and Carlos, what sort of experiences have you all had at, or have you had any book events, any book signings? And if you have, what did you think?
I'll go first. I've had interesting experiences. So my debut, which was, what year is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
September
After
2021.
COVID, it could be 2 years, could be 20. I never know.
Who knows? My debut, I was kind of being made homeless like the day after my book release. It was really fun. It was a bad situation. So I was packing a U-Haul. I was not even knowing where I was sleeping that night. It was a little chaotic in my life. But a friend of mine, I hadn't known at the time that she was actually the director of her library, of a rural library, invited me to come out. So they bought several copies of my books for like prizes for people who came out, and had a few people buy. There wasn't a lot of tenants. It was still, you know, a lot of people were hesitant with pandemic, but set things up. It was fun. I did a little reading. People got into it, and they streamed it on Facebook. And then the next day I moved away, and the next day I did actually do what I thought would be really, really fun, but I was too frazzled at that point, and I hadn't done enough marketing. But I did a paint night, you know, where y'all go to a place, and I thought it would be fun to do a painting of like the theme of my books, and that way it would introduce people who like painting to my books, and people that like my books can enjoy painting. It was so. I want to do it again. I think it'd be fun, but the hard thing is I did move to a state where I have very few friends and family. So as an unknown author, I don't know that I would get any support here. I don't think anyone would show up, and any attempts I've made at local libraries or Barnes and Noble to support indies, they're not here, and that's kind of discouraging.
You know, it's I'm pretty sure. So Charles D'Amico is my boss at Blue Handle Publishing, and he joined and has been giving gifts, you know, right after I asked that question. So I guess somehow his ears were burning, because Charles probably doesn't know it, but I had just asked them. I told them about Leslie coming in and the events that we were going to have tomorrow, and that's why I was asking them about book events. So. So Charles, I guess that question was for you, and I'm glad you're here to hear the answers. Carlos, have you done any book events, and what have your experiences been like?
So I have not, and one of the things is that well, I don't know if I had mentioned it in the beginning, but I live in Costa Rica, and one of the things here is that unless the book is in Spanish, they're not going to do a book event. Right now, I'm working on the translation of the first book. And after that, I'm working with someone that, you know, will get me into some book fairs and things like that. But I haven't done that. What I've done to get visibility for my book is pretty much what I'm doing here on TikTok. I've been doing this series of videos called A Lesson in Horror, which is just picking one particular detail about horror and trying to expand on it a little bit, like, kill your favorite character, things like that. And also, like, I've been doing like daily horror memes, like funny things. And then from that, I go into, I sig um, into promoting my book. So that's what I've been doing. But as far as book events and things like that, I have not done anything yet. That's why podcasts like this or live streams like this really help. It
I think,
gets the visibility that I wouldn't get otherwise.
yeah, I think a fun thing that honestly could work for all of these genres, which no one is going to do, but they should, is partnering with a local escape room to do one on the theme of your book. Because I love escape rooms. I've designed escape rooms, and just the fun of like trying to figure out who done it and that kind of stuff. Obviously not giving spoilers, but then you have a book on the side, but like you had fun, whether or not you survived. Enjoy the book.
That's an amazing idea, actually.
As somebody who writes in the mystery thriller genre, I have always felt like I would be like, people would expect me to just be able to solve everything, because that's sort of what I do.
Have you not done the escape room, Rick?
I have never. No, like I said, I've never really pushed for it. Yeah. So Charles asked this, and I had the same question. How does one get into designing an escape room? Because that seems like it's something that's very niche. Like, how did you get into that?
Okay, so I mean, I've only held them in like garages and homes. During lockdowns, I actually have one that's on YouTube that a bunch of people enjoyed, which was very hard because they can only interact in certain ways, but lots of video and pictures and stuff. How do I get into? I don't know. I had a roommate, and she and her now husband and we would go to all the ones in the local area, and just our brains like pinged off of each other. So we're like the perfect trio. We just love it. And so then we started designing them at home. We bought different kinds of locks and lock boxes, and there's kind of like a systematic different types of puzzles once you get into the culture of escape rooms, that like how to hide things and the logic puzzles put together in different scenarios. I don't know how to explain it, but it's fun. And I figure it kind of works in my fantasy series. There is a lot of mystery element to it that I think a lot of people are not used to in fantasy, and the like who done it or who's going to do it. And I think you should try it and let us know how that goes, because it's fun.
Excellent. And so we were talking about promotion earlier. Danielle, because you are kind of working with somebody else's IP, and your work is sort of tied to. She had to go on pause.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
I was dying, and I was like, oh God, I gotta plug it in.
Did you get it plugged in? Actually, I should plug it in too.
I'm good. Please continue.
But anyway, so what I was saying is because you are and it's essentially part of a team along with the author whenever you're doing these audiobooks, do you feel pressure to promote an audiobook once you get one done? And how do you go about doing that other than telling people here on TikTok that, hey, I did an audiobook?
Interesting enough. Yes, I like to promote my work because
sorry,
the dead. I don't know what that means, but
like the first live we went on, my phone died in the middle, and I was like, "Peace out, guys." I'm so sorry. She's mocking me.
Well, I came in and I helped out too. What were we talking about? Sorry. What were we talking about?
Promoting
audiobooks.
Oh yeah, promoting audiobooks. Yeah, so when I talk to the authors, I say to them, I will promote in my way. It hasn't been too bad, but I have had some people that are like, here, do this and do that and do this for promotion. And I'm like, meh. I'll do, I kind of have my own thing that I like to do. And I'm not saying that we can't have a conversation. And if you're like, hey, I have this silly idea, and I'm like, cool, I'll do that. But you know, I mean, if you follow me, you'll see all my silly videos that I make for things. And but yeah, I like to promote the things that I do because I like the things that I do. And so as much as I want everybody to listen to the audiobook, I'm also please just read the book. You know, I like them. Go read them. But so TikTok, I love TikTok. My brain works like TikTok. It's minute increments all day. Like, oh, here's this minute happening. Here's this minute happening. So to me, it's really easy to make these videos on here. But yeah, I have an Instagram. I have a Facebook. I'm not great at those. I'm much better at this. So, but I mean, I'm the same way with marketing. I'm not very good at it. I just kind of do what I do. And if people think it's funny and hopefully check my stuff out, that's cool. If not, that's okay too. You know, I'm just here to be silly and have a good.
One thing I was going to say, one thing I was going to say is that you and Marcus were mentioning the fact that you guys like working with indie authors because you develop this kind of rapport, this kind of relationship with them. And that's what I'm thinking now that I hear you talk about promotion. If I hired somebody to record my book, I mean, the first thing I would do the moment it's live is like, if it were you, Danielle, I would be like, oh, Danielle narrated my book. She's an amazing narrator. If you have a book, hire her. She's wonderful. She's amazing. And I think it's kind of like this symbiotic thing, you know. You're telling people, hey, go check out this person's book, and I'm like, hey, go check out this narrator. She's amazing. And I think that's the way in which we support each other because it's if for example, if it's like a how to say like a big publishing house and they're hiring a narrator, it's probably going to be a lot more impersonal, and they're just going to put your name in the cover, and that's about it. You know, whereas in the case of an independent writer, what they will actually we will actually feel so thankful for the fact that you treated our book with respect and that you brought it to life, that we want to get you visibility for it.
You know,
yeah,
that
I think it's a
gonna
really
ask...
nice. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No, I was just going to say that that is one of my favorite things is becoming friends with my authors. And yes, we all are like, check this person out, check this person. Like we all, and that's how I've gotten some of my jobs. Like I said, through word of mouth. Like those authors will say to their author friends, oh, you got to use Danielle. And then they'll contact me and then we move forward. And yeah, it's so cool. And yeah, I love that. And I love that we're all there to help each other out, to promote each other, and I'm happy to do it if I have time. You know.
Yeah. So this is a little in the weeds, but as an author working with smaller presses and now working with Blue Handle Publishing, I've gotten to see a lot of different versions of author contracts and how people get paid and when and how much and all that stuff. And I'm curious because independent authors, if you're essentially publishing only your own books, if you're your own self-publisher, then you kind of have to do and take the royalty cut that Amazon and Ingram Spark give you. But for a narrator, you guys have actual contracts, a lot like authors would with the publishing house. What sort of different iterations have you dealt with? Because a few of the audio narrators on here, sometimes there's royalty split, sometimes it's a flat fee, sometimes it's a combination of both. What sort of stuff have you encountered, and are any of them, in your opinion, better and more equitable for both parties?
I've done all three. I've done royalty share, straight up royalty share. I've done royalty share, like a split, the hybrid, where you pay a little and we have a royalty share. And I've done straight up pay. I don't really have, I don't know. Some people don't like royalty share. I like royalty share as long as the project is right. As long as things are all lined up. Like, I have to like the book. I have to feel that marketing will happen, in some way or another. Sometimes I'm more than happy if it's a series. I'll do the first book for royalty share, and we'll see how that goes. And then if you want me to do more books, but maybe it didn't sell well, we'll have to talk about doing a hybrid or doing full pay. But if it does well, then we may just stick with royalty share. We'll see. But I like all of them. A nice thing about the PFA being paid per finished hour is if you need money right now, then it's here you have it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But with what I like about royalty share is that once you build up a library of royalty share, you're making that money. Every time a book sells, you make money off of it. So, there's pluses and minuses in all of it. The thing about PFH, the hard thing is, especially with independent authors, is it's not cheap. And so trying to, since I do like working with independent authors, I want to try to make it work for everybody, so sometimes
Right.
I do understand that PFH can be hard.
All right, we have a question in the audience. Do you feel if a series has more than one narrator as it goes, does that hurt sales? That's interesting because a lot of the the big series, they can probably do multi-book deals with their narrators and stuff like that. If you do an audiobook for a book that has a series, do you push for that? Do you say, hey, I want to do this, I like this book, why don't you go ahead and sign me up for all the ones you're going to do in the future? And we've talked to a few audiobook authors who have those kind of deals, and they seem to like it.
I have at this point. I think that is what I've done. I'm trying to think back. I don't think I've done anywhere. I only did one of them. I don't know if I can talk about this one yet. Let's say my friend Jill may be taking over a book series from a different narrator, and for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. But I have heard that people enjoy having the same narrator for every book. I think there are times that either the author wants somebody new, the narrator wants to do different, it doesn't want to do the project anymore, and so they have to move on to somebody else. Maybe the narrator isn't narrating anymore, so they have to find somebody else. So there's a lot of reasons that it could switch hands, but as long as I'm enjoying the book, if I enjoy the book, I love to do the whole series. So, and especially the one I'm working on right now is number 7 in a series. It's called Old Fang Sign by Crystal Rayne Love. Vampires, gotta love it. But honestly, I started doing it today and I was like, these characters are so easy to fall into. I know them so well at this point after 7 books. So, it's, yeah. So I love doing series if they'll keep me for the whole thing.
Excellent. So I'm going to have to take 1 second and just thank Colleen, who is Charles's wife, who's been sending us a ton of gifts. And all that, as Tanya points out, goes toward getting something to replace this thing behind me. I'm gonna find, I guess, one, because I live in an apartment and spaces, we want to conserve it, so something that folds up or something. But we'll take a look at and we'll get into it. So anyway. Carlos or Jen, did I interrupt? I feel like I interrupted.
I think we were all trying to talk at once.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Go for it, Carlos.
It was all at once. So what I was going to say is I can actually give you an example. I have this series of books that I only listen to in audio. It's from author David Wong, and they're called like the Dave and John series from John Dies at the End. That was a funny situation because there are 4 books, and the first book, the narrator knocked it out of the park because these are horror / comedy novels, and the narrator in the first one knocked it out of the park. And then the second book came out, and the book is actually really good, but they changed the narrator, and this person's voice, it just didn't fit the narrative. It sounded it just didn't hit the mark when it came to the comedy. And then the third book came out, and you could immediately see that they switched to the first narrator. And then for the fourth book, the same. Because when you listen to a book, you get used to the voice of the character. You get used to their cadence, the way they say things, especially when it's like very dry humor. That's very hard for some narrators to hit. And then when it's very dry humor and they say it in a very exaggerated way, it misses the mark. And in this case, that's what happened. So, yes, as a listener, I can definitely say having the same narrator across a series is usually a plus.
Yeah, I think I agree. For audiobooks, I'm not as picky as a lot of people, but I do feel like audiobook listeners can be extremely picky, that they have their favorite narrators and they're just really picky. And I feel like if they like the first one and then it switches, I hear that criticism a lot of like, oh, I can't stand this. And I don't think if they're that type of picky, that if they listened to the first one and they couldn't stand the narrator and they brought in a new one for the second, I don't think a lot of those people would still travel over because they just dislike the first one so much. I'm not the picky, like I said, but still, like I Am Number 4, right? It's done by a male narrator, and I think he does a pretty good job, but I hate how he does teenage girls. Like, it's very cringy falsetto. And, come the second book, I think it's the same narrator, and now it's dual point of view, where we're in a girl's head a lot of time, and I'm just like, oh, this is cringe. But again, I'm not as picky, and I think a lot of people, yeah, I think you'll lose them faster. But I definitely understand, just like you're explaining, Danielle, that if you did that first book and it's not paying off for you because you did a royalty share, then you have the right to say, sorry, you're going to have inconsistency in your series if you can't pay per hour. So I don't think it's really ever in their benefit to change, because I think you lose the picky ones right away.
Yeah.
Right. And it's got to be almost like when you're watching a TV show and, you start the next season and they've replaced a character with a different actor and they're saying the same names and it's just like, oh, but that's not that person. I know that, like, one of my favorite audiobook series that I listened to was the You series by Carolyn Kepnes. And yeah, if they hadn't had Santino Fontana, I think was his name, whoever the voice actor was for that, I probably would have been like, oh, but that's not the same guy. And what was nice is he even sounded like the Joe Goldberg from the TV show. So there was a lot of crossover there. What I like, whenever you get into the big budget audiobooks, what can be cool talking about, keeping the same stuff is whenever, say, like the Harry Bosch books, they now a lot of times are narrated by Titus Welliver, who plays Harry Bosch or who played him in those series. So that's I think because it is voice acting, and I know I try, to be careful whenever I'm talking about people who narrate audiobooks, to call them voice actors, because that is what you are. Like me, yes. If I were to take my short stories, and I've thought about this, and just get on the microphone and narrate them for people who don't want to read, I give them away for free with my if you subscribe to my newsletter. And so I thought, well, people who enjoy audio, I could maybe narrate them myself, even though I hate my own voice, as I say on here a lot. But, that is something I can do. I would be narrating that because I am not an actor in any way, shape, or form. But, you, Danielle, and Marcus, and all the narrators we've had on here, you all are voice actors. And, we've had I love it when you guys talk about your craft, because, writers talk about our craft, but I don't often get to hear other artists talk about their craft. And so I love it whenever I get a chance to do it. And I think that because it is such a performance, there's a lot more to that consistency. And what you guys are able to do that is very individual to you. Because if we were to take, you and, like maybe Paige and Allie, three of the voice actors that we've had on the show, and give you all the same book to read, they would be three very different performances, and they would all be spectacular in their own way. And so I think it is very important to have that consistency. Whereas as in books, it's the same thing with the author's voice, right? Like there are some people who write posthumously for Tom Clancy, and those guys I know. I know a couple of those guys, and they are chosen. The process to be able to write, a Tom Clancy or Tom Clancy Jr. novel is pretty incredible. What those guys, what they have to propose, the people that have to, give their stamp of approval, and it's because the artistry and the craft that goes into what we do. Because for people who don't read a lot, I hear them talk about, you know, so and so, why don't they just write this type of book or this other type of book? And it's like, well, because their voice doesn't fit that. And people are like, it's just writing words down, right? It's like, no, that's not.
No.
That's like I could not sit down and just write a fantasy novel, right? I would have to study. I would have to talk to people who do that. I would have to get critique. My voice is crime fiction because I was a reporter, and that's what I read growing up, and that's just how that develops. And so that leads me to a question I had for you, Danielle, talking about voice, because people have said that you're funny. Is that something people told you growing up and you knew that you could put that into your acting? Or were you maybe not trying to be funny and all of a sudden, you ended up you were? Like, how did that come about, and how does that influence the type of projects that you take on?
I've always been goofy. I was one of those kids where my parents were like, okay, turn it off for a second. I was always on. When I got to, I guess, when I got to college, I really started getting into acting. I did it in high school, but once you get to college, then you're really deep diving into it. And I started doing improv, and that just clicked with me. Like, I got it. I was like, okay, I get how this works. This is silly and it's fun. And I just thought I like to have fun. Now, I happen to also be a huge fan of horror. I love horror books. I love horror movies. So I love to be scared. So I kind of have both sides of the spectrum there. I like to be silly, but I also like to be scared. But yeah, I think what's so great about learning, especially learning things like improv and learning how to just be silly and how to let go and not care what people think about you, is that then trying to do something like an audiobook where you have to come up with 1,000 different voices and make them all real, is you don't get too wrapped up in having to be serious. I don't know. Even when I've done horror books, you still have to let it, it's not silly, but it's,
you have a range.
Yes.
Not all just one tone the whole time.
Right.
Yeah, and horror and humor kind of balance each other very well. So it's a good skill to have.
Yeah.
Definitely for narrating horror.
Yeah.
So for the authors, do you feel like you chose your genres, or do you feel like your genres chose you in a way? Because I feel like crime fiction chose me because I wasn't seeking out to even really write fiction, but it just kind of happened. What was your experience in finding, the genres that you like to write in?
I think for me, it mostly chose me. It's a balance. Like, I grew up watching Star Trek, Stargate with my dad, so I was definitely a sci-fi girl. But I've written one thing that's sci-fi, but I just lean towards fantasy more. And a lot of that is, I always say that I'm inspired by dreams and what ifs. And my first book, Cedar Shadow Wars, it was definitely from a dream about dandelions and a foreboding. And I was like, plant people assassins. We're on top of it. And so, I think to some extent I also decided, because I realized that you do want to be niche. In my life, I'm very scattered. I have 6 YouTube channels on all sorts of different things, from ASMR to just everything. ADHD, we mentioned that, right? But I realized that, I try to go one thing. So I'm doing fantasy and I'm doing the fairy tales right now. I may branch out and do the sci-fi. I may do other things, but right now I'm not doing, the domestic terrorism thriller or horror ones that I've thought of, just because branding. So in that way, I'm choosing, but for the most part, it chose me.
How about you, Carlos?
Yeah. In my case, I would pretty much say it picked me. because even when I at one point I tried to write a sci-fi story. Well, it wasn't really sci-fi. It was like a superpowered people novel, and I was actually really happy with it. But when I read it, I was like, this is not me. And every time I wrote something scary, I just felt right at home. And so I might not be able to do, like, for example, like you do, writing a crime thriller in which you have to be very detailed when it comes to like forensic evidence, science and all of that. I can do it, but what I can do definitely is scare you. So I would definitely say is what I would definitely say is that I feel it picked me, and even when I tried to get away from it, I just came back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely started projects that I wanted to be like the only one that I've truly abandoned is a novel. I did turn it into, it was the first attempt at screenwriting. I turned it into a pilot about, and it was about a PI, and I wanted to write specifically a private investigator mystery, which in crime fiction is a very popular but very narrow genre. Because generally I write, I say crime fiction, and then within that there are, mine are generally categorized as thrillers because the main characters are usually put into life or death situations, throughout a lot of the book, and it's not a mystery because my characters are not paid to investigate. Well, that's what a PI is. They are paid to investigate things. And of course, journalists, a lot of my characters are journalists and writers, but that's not the same. You're not a trained investigator. You're still an amateur, investigator, because you can be a reporter and get thrown onto the crime beat and have no clue what you're doing, because it's happened to me before. That is, I definitely, as a reporter, it's like, well, we need somebody to cover the night crime, and you're it, tag. So that was my introduction into covering cops and crime, and so it's very different. A PI, is very specific, and I thought I want to break into that market because I feel like I could write characters that would go well and that would transition. The characters that I write, as journalists, okay, well, it can't be that different than PI, and I feel like I could have done it mechanically, but it was just not coming out right, and I knew that it was not going to be. It was that one where I was writing and I was thinking too much with my intellectual brain and not enough with the emotional part of the brain. And so, yeah, I definitely said, okay, well, that is, that's not going to work as a novel. And of course, writing for the screen is different than writing a novel. So I did that. But the point is that I have definitely tried to write things that are not me, and it doesn't work. And I think that all authors probably have to experience that at least once to realize that no, I have to write what I want to write, and then that will find an audience. You will, if you write something that is powerful, that is from you, people will be drawn to that, and they will recognize that. And even if you're not on the bestseller list, you are going to feel good about the response you get to your work. Okay, and so Tanya did want me to mention, because we've got about we've been going for an hour and a half, so I want to remind people who are left, maybe people who are just joining us, that we do have another episode of Book Talk on Book Talk coming up later on this week on Friday, and we're doing it because we have a British author, Elena James, who's going to be joining us from across the pond, and we like having international guests because it's always a little bit different, and it's going to be at 6 p.m. Central, but we love having those international authors, and they obviously their schedules are different than ours, right? Like even if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, or here in the Central, it's an hour or so away. They're coming to us from the future, and especially we had a couple of Australian authors on here one time, and that was the time difference was definitely, it was difficult to make sure that because I think they were staying up really late and I was going early, but it might have been the other way around. I don't know. What is time even? So, but getting back to this episode of Book Talk on Book Talk, I did want to ask Danielle, have you ever started a project? You know, I was just talking about, authors who might have to abandon projects and write stuff that just isn't actually them. Have you ever started a project and then realized, oh, hey, I'm actually not going to be able to do this one, and how does that conversation work?
Luckily not yet. I'm pretty picky about what I go after. Kind of like Marcus was saying earlier, I know, and even what you were all just saying, I know what I like, and I kind of go after that. I will say I did one sci-fi book. I love sci-fi. I'm a Star Wars person. If we need to fight later, I understand. I don't want
I mean,
to.
Star Wars is much lower than Stargate and Star Trek. But...
I'm Star Trek, so yeah,
Oh,
that's
them are far-eating words.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
A lot of people. I've heard
Stargate,
people
top
who are
tier.
like,
I do
I like both. Why can't people just like them both the same? And I'm like, they're not even, just because they have star in the name, they're not the same.
I mean, we can like them all. It's just we have to recognize that some are much more superior than others.
Right. That's all I'm saying. Anyway.
So yeah, sorry, we totally derailed you.
We're still friends. Let's still be friends. What the heck were we talking about? See, now, what were we talking about? Sci-fi. Oh, I did it. So I did a sci-fi book, Commanding the Red Lotus by R.J. Sullivan. And I had never done sci-fi before. And I had done a ton of his books. I've done all of his books. And, but all the ones I had done before that were all ghosts and, fantasy kind of stuff. And, so I was starting it and I was doing it, and I kept saying to him, I'm like, do I sound right doing this? I don't feel like I'm sounding right. And he's like, you sound fine. He's like, stop being so silly. But for some reason, those phrases, I'll tell you what, like, I don't know how you write them, because I'm like, I had to sit and say the phrases over and over again, like if I was explaining the ship or something, or what it was something. And boy, my brain would be like, nope, that doesn't make sense to me. So you have to say it so many times to make it start to sound like it's a normal thing you would say. So, but but I still did the book. I ended up doing the book. I haven't had one yet where I was like, no, this isn't right for me. I have had ones where I was like, ooh, I want to audition for that, or yeah, let me look into that. And then the further I looked into it, I went, no, never mind. And so then I just approach it. But so far so good.
And I take it you're always able to read an entire book or manuscript before you commit. I take it that's just standard procedure for a voice actor.
It should be, yes. So once we get the contract, once we say, I was telling you about the first 15. So before the first 15 even happens, I read the whole book, and as long as it's all good, then we go on. Before that first 15 is approved, both the author and the narrator can say, this isn't working for us. So yeah, Carlos, like you were saying, if I'm giving you my first 15 and you're like, it's just, the pacing isn't right, or I don't like the way you're doing this character. If I can't give that to you, it's okay for you to be like, then I'm going to find somebody else, because you don't want to, and don't feel bad about that. I mean, it's your book. It should be the right voice for it. So, So did I just veer off into another? See,
No,
this is my.
No, you're fine. And I would imagine as an author that picking a narrator and working with them is very much like picking an editor and working with them, because I had at least half a dozen give me a sample edit, right, of a chapter or so many words, and realizing that it definitely isn't just about price. It's about, are they changing your authorial voice? Are they, right? There were some suggested changes that I was like instantly, nope, we are not compatible. And it's not always good or bad. Sometimes it's just compatibility. And that's why you get those, your auditions or your first 15 kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking as an editor, that is something that, not all editors take that into account. They don't author voices either isn't something they understand or isn't something that they are concerned with, because there's the mechanics, there's grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure, and then there's has an author broken those rules because of the way it sounds and the personality of the author and their character, and it's not super easy to do, I think, unless you also write, because I can't imagine, and there are some editors who we have gotten their samples before we hire them for Blue Handle and Book Puma, and if it's just and I don't think Charles is still with us, but he likes to call it the English teacher. Is it the English teacher or is it a book editor? And they are two different things. Now, people with masters in literature and stuff like that can be very good at developmental editing, and then we have some fantastic developmental editors who that is their background. But when it comes to line editing and doing like the actual work on the page, I find that people who also write, whether they've been published or not, they are the ones who are, better at recognizing that author voice and, when possible, enhancing it. Like one of my favorite things, and one of the things I get complimented on is, an author, and I as an author do this too, are trying to really nail a metaphor. Or maybe a simile that is not an often used simile, and the author, they know what they're trying to do, and it comes out a little bit longer than they want, and I can recognize that, and I can sharpen it up and really get that imagery and get that visual there. Those are some of the biggest compliments I've gotten, and it's because I think I know what I would want to do if I were an author writing that scene. I'm like, oh, I see what they're trying to get at. And because I have those fresh eyes, I can see that. And Tanya's down there in the comments, and I've we've done a chapter together. I like to say I make things bleed, and that of course comes from journalism. Whenever it's journalists are not nearly as nice as book editors usually, like managing editors and editors in the newsroom. But yeah, it's about eliminating words, because if you can, it's like what's the metaphor I really like is a sculptor or someone who creates, a sculptor who creates statues. It's like there's a big block of granite and the statue's inside of it, and my job as the sculptor, or my job as the editor, if I'm looking at a big fat manuscript, is to chip away all the granite that isn't supposed to be there. And at the end, what is revealed is the statue as it should have always been. And that's the approach I like to take to manuscripts, is the story, the best version of that story is in there. And then it's my job to chip away all the stuff that is getting in the way of us being able to see that exactly how it is supposed to be. And, generally speaking, and it's a weird mathematical thing, and I don't know why it is this way, but generally, turn the statue of Bob into David. Yes, there you go. That's see, Charles just did for me what I try to do to people. Take that long story that I told and get it down into one sentence. But no, that's exactly what we're trying to do. And generally, I can take out, and a good editor can take out, at least 10% of a full manuscript. And I don't know why the math works out that way, but if you go sentence by sentence, taking out the words that don't need to be there, and sometimes paragraphs and sometimes scenes, but hopefully by the time you do the developmental editing, not all that stuff is there. But yeah, if it's 100,000 word manuscript when I get it, if I don't get it down to 90,000, then I start to wonder, did I do as thorough a job as I should have? And generally, I've never taken 20% out, because if I have to do that, then there are problems that needed to be dealt with before it got to the line edit stage, right? And so either me as the developmental editor or one of our other developmental editors did not quite get the story where it needed to be. But just from a language perspective, if I can't take out 10% of your manuscript, then either you did a damn good job by yourself, which happens, or I have to go back and make sure that I did make the pages bleed, and I really did take out all of the stuff that every author does. And so I get upset as an author whenever I get an edit back and there's like one or two changes a page and I generally have to point stuff out and send it back and say, I would really like it if you were meaner to me, which is basically what you're asking. Could you please be brutal and pretend like you hate me and that I'm the worst author alive and just tear my story to shreds? Because if you don't, the Amazon reviewers will. And that's the thing
that's how I am with my beta readers.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't use developmental editor, but I use several beta readers. And it's like, if you just tell me at the end of 10 chapters, like, I love this, that is not helpful. Not at all.
Yes.
So I can't stay too long, but I did have a question for Danielle. So especially working with indie authors, but even, I don't want to go with that stigma, editing. Now, I've never once had a negative review about the editing on my books. I get good praise on that. I love my editor, but inevitably, mistakes happen. What was it? My editor and neither of us realized until a reader pointed out that there's a difference between parlay and parlay with an E and an A. And I said that people who were trying to, parlay in a war were parlaying like in gambling. Who knows? I mean, obviously those, I think they're pronounced the same, but if you come across an error, an obvious error, do you reach out to them or do you just read it the way it is? Because it should obviously be in its final format with you.
Right. It kind of depends. If it's something huge, like a name that's wrong, and then I'll say, hey, I noticed this, and I'll just change it, but I'll tell them. But if it's something like the word "the" is there twice, I just fix it on the fly. I have in the past, I was working with RJ Sullivan, and he had just put this book out and he hadn't had time to get the editor. He hadn't done all of that yet. And so he actually paid me to, as I was doing it, if I found huge things, I let him know. And, I'm not grammar. I don't know correct grammar and correct punctuation, but I was finding big things and telling him about it. But yeah, if it's something that I'm like, this was, especially like names, I've found that a lot. Name things, I'll point that out. I never know how picky I should be.
I've got an author friend who I just was thinking about with that because she can laugh at herself, and I know she's really great friends with her narrator, and I listen to the books, but she accidentally had in the final book that she dismantled a horse instead of she dismounted a horse, and I'm just imagining the narrators being like, I'm pretty sure we're not thinking the same thing.
Now, Carlos might dismantle a horse in one of his books. That can happen.
It depends on the genre, right?
I love horses, so I probably might. So.
Give me a reason. I will say that we are supposed to
read it word for word.
Yes, absolutely. You're supposed to do it no matter what. I kind of, again, I don't know, I haven't worked with a publishing house, so maybe they would be like, no, if there were two thes there, you read both thes. And it's like, okie dokie. But I just think, we all know there aren't supposed to be two thes. I'm going to take one out. We all know that. So, but yes, the rule is
I would imagine if we're working for a big publishing house, they would be more strict, and you'd just be like, well, it's not my problem because you're being rigid. But with an indie author, you could be like, I think I'm going to read it the way I am pretty sure it's meant to be. And if they find that as an error, because I know they come back to you and be like, you misread this, I imagine that's a calculated risk you're willing to take to correct it.
Yeah.
And honestly, as an author, if I have a voice actor reading my book and they find a mistake, I would really, really hope for them to let me know or just fix it on the fly, because it's more embarrassing if it actually gets published and
for sure.
And the error is there. Like with the beta readers that I've had for my book, I remember the very first one. Incredibly, it wasn't somebody I knew. It was just somebody who took the book and read it, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is wonderful! I really love this. I'm so envious that you can write it like this. I really love it. This is amazing. This is wonderful." And I was like, "Yeah, did not help at all, but thank you.
Yeah.
And then I sent it to this other person who his book is actually coming out next month, so I'm really looking forward to it. I was one of his beta readers, uh, and he tore my manuscript apart. He was like, so here's this thing, here's this other thing, here's this other thing. Like your first chapter doesn't start with your main character. It should start with your main character. And I was like, oh my God, you're totally right. I missed that. And that's what you need when you're sending that to people. You want them to be critical, because how are you going to improve if all you get are yes men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say it is hard because, and I don't mean this to sound mean, but it's not my job to fix it. I'm not being paid to fix it. So, as much as I want to sit down and be like, hey, here's all the things I found that were messed up, it's not, by the time I get it, I should be looking at the end product. And
of course,
I saw Charles say human error exists on all levels. Absolutely. That's why I'm like, I'm not mad about it. I'm not going to be like, I'm not doing your book because there was an error. I'm not mad about it. I'll just fix it on the fly. But I'm also not going to take a ton of extra time unless you pay me for it. If you pay me for it, I'll do it.
and I think that's one of the things that would intimidate me about being a narrator, is getting something that's underdeveloped and being like, I don't want to work with this. But I guess, you get a view ahead of time. But I think it's just a professional courtesy, just like I don't treat ARC readers like proofreaders. I send them a finished copy. And I have had one that mentioned a very small error. I'm like, cool, thank you. And I've had one that's like, I think this word is wrong. And I was like, actually, let me screenshot the Google. And they're like, I didn't know that was a word. And so, obviously these were respectful, friendly conversations, but it's an extremely rare thing. And by the time it gets to an ARC reader or a narrator, like it should be, let the beta readers and developmental editors go through that crap. They're the poor souls that we all rely on.
It's like Danielle was saying, like if she sees two thes, one right after the other, okay, it's tiny mistake. But if I'm giving my book to a voice actor, I don't expect them to, edit my book while they narrate. It's not, it's extra work, and I'm sure that it's not appreciated.
Right. And that's something you're going to find out even before you audition for something. You go on Amazon and you do that look inside, and you can read the beginning of the book. You're going to be able to tell really quick if it's well edited or, has a good voice. But also, even if that, sometimes you'll see the auditions that they post. It's like, oh, that was great. I love that audition. Well, yeah, they picked the best part of the book for you to audition for. And then and you're like, oh, that isn't as good as that 5-minute audition that I did.
That's funny you say that. As somebody who reads submissions for Blue Handle, I definitely have people who say, "Hey, can I send you? Chapter 5 is just really great. That's the one I want." And I'm like, no, actually, no, you can't just send me randomly Chapter 5, because if you don't think the first 4 before that are also very good, then you are not ready to submit to me. And that's something that and this is a lot of writers at all levels when they're first starting out, is they want to do things before they're ready. And even after 4 novels, I find myself thinking that too. Like I have to really schedule out and remember that, hey, I'm going to have to finish the first draft, do another revision, and do at least one more revision before I think I'm ready to send it out, if I want to query some agents or do whatever it is that I want to do with it. It's all right, so we got about 10 minutes, so I'll try to keep this short, even though I'm prone to long-windedness. But a lot of writers at every step, they send their stuff before it's too early. If you're an independent author, I know a lot who've done it. Charles will tell you he's done it down there because he started out as a independent author before turning it into a publishing business that we all work for. Is you put your stuff out there too early, and that's when you get the feedback that hey, this has quite a few errors, or hey, you have several names that are wrong, as Danielle was saying, the wrong character speaking at the wrong time. And every author I know does that in their first draft every once in a while. It happens when you're deep into the middle of your climax and stuff is happening. The wrong character comes out. And so, yeah, you didn't take the time to go through it one more time. And you always want to go through it one more time. And so for people who are sending out to agents and to editors at publishing houses, you always, whenever you think you're ready, I tell people, when you think you're ready to submit to me, to submit to other people, go through your manuscript one more time. Or if you are an independent publisher, then make sure that you have an editor you trust go through and look, for copy editing mistakes. You've done your developmental, you've done a really good line edit, but make sure that somebody is also proofing out your pages to find those things, because when you think you're ready, it almost always needs one more read through by somebody, being it you or somebody else, to catch those last few things. And I want to give everybody a few minutes, everybody out there in the comments who's watching. If you aren't following all of us, please do. And then visit our websites once you do follow, because we all have them in our profiles. And why don't all of us go through and let everyone know where they can find us and our work other than here on this platform. And we'll start with Jen.
Well, it's in my link in my bio, jhauserwrites.com. I have the same handle on all social media. I just don't post on them as much. But yeah, that's it. You'll be able to see all my books. I'm also starting pages, like tabs on there for my publishing services that I will be offering soon.
Thanks.
Danielle?
So I'm the same. DM narrates on all of my platforms. I have my website in a link in my bio, but it's daniellemeuthing.com. And yeah, reach out. I love to talk to people.
Carlos.
So my handle here on TikTok is Visit White Harbor. And the one in Twitter, if you want to follow me on Twitter, is White Harbor Cult. You can find the link to my link tree on my profile, and thankfully now it's clickable. Thank you, TikTok. And you can find there the link to my book, White Harbor Book 1. Book 2 is coming out in June, and you can also find it like the link to my Patreon there in case you want to support me. Also, you can buy me a coffee because I'm addicted.
Aren't we all? Actually, I don't drink coffee. I drink tea and I drink soft drinks, and I'm sure that I should probably just stick to the tea, but it is what it is. And I am online at ricktreon.com. And if you go there, you can, see all my work and see all my social media. My social media handles are all over the place because I started them all at different times for different purposes and just never wanted to change the handles. But you can find all of it there. Thank you to our guests, including Marcus, who had to leave us a little early. But Jen, Danielle, Carlos, you all were great. I really loved the conversation we had. Thanks to everyone down in the comments for your likes. We almost hit 10,000. We've hit that one time, and it was really crazy. So thank you for all of that. Thank you for the gifts. I know that we got a lot of them, and we appreciate you. And, for those of you who are free on Friday evening starting at 6 o'clock Central, we're going to have another one. And then every Wednesday night, I'm pretty sure that my wonderful executive producer, Tanya, has me booked up all the way through June, I think. I just hope that she didn't book me for Thriller Fest, because I will not. I will be, if I'm online, it will be a bad idea because I will probably be drinking at the hotel bar. So, but no, I'm sure we got the schedule worked out. But thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Wonderful 2 hours. And hopefully we can get all of you on again sometime soon.
Of course.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.